And we are, as a people, inherently and historically
Wake up!
opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
The show that asks questions about why we don't ask questions.
What the hell is going on?
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. I've got some conspiracy queries, and I'm Alan Park. Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to say it's the end of summer, getting to it. It's always a bit of a sad time for me because I prefer the summer. And we're heading into a busier time in the fall. There's always more stuff going on. And business at hand is, the International Business Times. Did you ever read that? There's a little article in there I thought I might enjoy in a dark kind of a way. It's entitled, this article from International Business Times, IB Times website, from September 16th. The headline reads, Canadian companies are the most corrupt and fraudulent, according to World Bank blacklist. Yes, that's our leader, Stephen Harper, sitting at the helm of these corrupt companies. It says here that one Canadian company, I don't want to mention names, SNC-Lavalin, has the highest number of corrupt and fraudulent subsidiaries, according to a list of blacklisted organizations produced by the World Bank. Canadian companies make up 119 of the more than 250 entries from around the world on the list, marking a 7-year high for the country. And Harper's been in power for 8 years. Is there a connection there? I think there is. I think there must be. According to the website, SNC-Lavalin is one of the world's leading engineering and construction companies and a major owner of infrastructure. That's stuff that you walk on and drive on. Europe and Central Asia accounted for 19% of all the cases, with the Caribbean contributing 21%, and East Asia and Pacific regions 16% of the crookedness going on in the world. But Canada rocking it with 119 Canadian companies of the 250 entries on that list during this realm of law and order Harper, who has been anything but, while what you would call regular blue-collar crime plummets, prisons continue to get built, and yet these clowns at the top of this corrupt regime don't seem to find any time behind bars. Why not, I say? Government's a pretty interesting thing. Hey, here, I wanted to throw you back in time about a month or so to last month. This was kind of an interesting note. I meant to bring it up on the show earlier, and it completely slipped by me. But John Kerry met at the United States Embassy in Brasilia, Brazil. And while speaking to State Department workers and their families, Kerry explained in regards of the surveillance thing with Ed Snowden leaking everything he's leaked. Kerry said that he's not too fond of the internet. This little thing called the internet makes it much harder to govern. And he went deeper into his explanation as to why he disfavors it, saying, I'm a student of history, and I love to go back and read a particularly great book, like Kissinger's book about diplomacy. Now, don't confuse that with Hitchens' book about Kissinger, where he's a war criminal. The Kissinger's book about diplomacy, where you think about the 18th and 19th centuries and the balance of power and how difficult it was for countries to advance their interests and years of war. Well, folks, ever since the end of the Cold War, forces have been unleashed that were tampered down for centuries by dictators, and that was complicated further by this little thing called the internet and the ability of people everywhere to communicate instantaneously and to have more information coming at them in one day than most people can process in months or a year. And he said that, did John Kerry, right before he started to get on TV and sell us a bill of goods about the fake reasons that we need to go into Syria and have another war that will kickstart more war in a war-torn region and a war-poor people paying for it, which is some pretty good timing. Anyway, I just wanted to draw those two together because they are absolutely linked as far as I'm concerned. Now, the Senate in the United States, Dianne Feinstein, wants to make the right of press a privilege. The Senate Judiciary Committee has moved forward a bill that would offer a shield law protection for journalists and prevent them from having to testify about their work. And that's great for people that work at those organizations, but for anyone else, such as this show and many others, and more accurate representations and reportage of what's going on in the world, they're not going to have those special privileges, and they are not going to be deemed newsworthy. Even though the news, if you watch CNN lately, whether it's the recent Navy shooter who was probably hopped up on psychiatric antidepressants, but we never want to make that link in the mainstream public, do we? No. So get your mainstream news while the government that's being reported on sanctions it. And now, a quick dive into Meet the New Owners. Of course, you know Canada sold most of its oil rights to China. And we can't stop that, but we can meet the new owners and get to know our economic overlords a little bit better. This is from Time.com. Chinese university asked students to sign suicide waivers. A university in southern China asked students entering its freshman class to sign a document absolving the school of responsibility should the student commit suicide. A macabre sign, some say, of the growing pressures of Chinese society. And that brings to a close this episode of Meet the New Owners. And now, let's go to our interview. My guest today is Wally Dove. And Wally is, he's kind of a guy that a lot of us would, back when he was working where he used to work, he's kind of a guy that maybe some of us wouldn't like working at what used to be called Revenue Canada. And Revenue Canada has a lot of in-house bingo parties and card games because they really can't make friends. I wonder why that is. If you're listening in the United States, the equivalent, of course, is the IRS. And Wally spent 13 years there. So let's commend him, first of all, for no longer working for them. That's already amazing. And let's also say that Wally was a certified general accountant, so he knows a lot about numbers and how they work and where they come from. And as a certified general accountant, Wally started to break out of his old ways, I could only describe it, and start to help people and counsel people and show them how they were, in fact, being subjugated into slavery through unfair and illegal monetary practices of the, let's say, the bankers or the government of the bankers or whoever owns who's wagging the dog, I don't know. We try to look into that. And Wally got pretty prolific at doing this and subsequently was kicked out of the CGA and is no longer, although I'm sure he's still just as good with the numbers, he no longer is able to legally give that kind of advice, the CGA type work. He's no longer able to do that, and happily so. And he's also very happy that he is no longer working for either of those organizations, and instead he is now one of the founders of the Human Rights Defender League in Canada. And if you're listening anywhere in the world, this is going to be good for you, regardless of your country. With the exception of a handful of countries, of course. But if you're United States, Australia, Britain, you're going to get a lot out of today's program. So let's bring him on and say hello to Wally Dove. Wally, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Before we get started, tell me, I just want to get a little bit of a background on what it was like for you while you were working in Revenue Canada, what is now called CRA, Canada Revenue Agency. They somehow or other changed the name from one inconsequential name to the other. But what was it like? What were you doing there? And how did those days of work lead you to realize, hey, I don't want to be doing this?
Well, first let me say, Alan, that it wasn't insignificant when they changed the name because The CRA is an independent, maybe a crown, but it's an independent corporation now. It is no longer part of the Department of National Revenue, so the minister probably has nothing to really say about it. So the government really has nothing to say about its operation, and I believe that has contributed to a large degree, probably totally, to the callousness with which they seem to be doing their jobs today. Because I'll tell you, they've awakened more people than I could ever awaken by their actions and harming people, which is the way people wake up anyway. We're never going to stir from our complacency as long as everything is fine and we're happy and we've got everything we need, even though we don't have everything we want. So it was a significant change, I believe, and it's now they are now independent, and I believe the cavalier attitude and the illegality and the breaking of the law itself and the rules and everything else is more prolific now than it ever was in the past when it was a government agency.
But when you were working there, it was a Revenue Canada.
Yes, and it was bad enough then. I can tell you, I'll cut right to the chase. It was so bad for me that I ended up talking to a psychiatrist to try to straighten myself out, because I had to get up every morning and go to work and do something that I hated, and that was to hurt people. That's what you do there. You either, I worked in 3 different sections or departments or whatever of the Revenue Canada. There's the auditors who raise the reassessments and so on. I did that. And there's the collectors that collect. I did that. And there's what's called the Enforcement Division now, or section. It used to be called Special Investigations. That's where you do special investigations of alleged or potential fraud under the Income Tax Act, leading to prosecutions in court. So I did all of those jobs. The one that I enjoyed, strangely enough, the most was collections, because it was there that I had the opportunity to work with people and make their lives better, if that could be done. But I used to always start off, do you believe that you owe Revenue Canada this money? And, if they said yes, then I said, oh, okay, well, then I'm going to help you pay it. I'm going to find a way working with you. That's how I used to do that job. Of course, that got me in a lot of trouble, too, because they didn't like that. And I was not promoted when I should have been, and I was held back a lot, which was a blessing in disguise, because that contributed, I think, to my leaving. But my awakening started right from day one. I couldn't understand how the government or anyone, including myself at the time, had the authority or the power to bring harm to people like that and tell them they owed money and they had to pay it and they had no choice and blah, 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 blah. It was just a horrible, horrible thing for me as an individual, because I didn't enjoy doing that. So, but I had a family to raise and I knew no better at the time, so I kind of hung in there. I actually worked there 2 different occasions. I left. I went into public practice, doing accounting work and tax work, in a public accounting practice of my own. And then I sold that and ended up the business that I was going into with one of my clients. It didn't fail. It never got started. And I ended up going back again for a second tour, this time in Toronto and Mississauga area. So, but it was just hell, having to get up every day and do what I had to do, I must say.
And so what was the straw that broke the camel's back, where you just said, I got to get out of here?
Well, I was working with the provincial counterpart at the time, doing the same job as with Revenue Canada. I had left and transferred over to there because I got the 2-level promotion that I was actually looking for Revenue Canada by going over to the province. They gave me 2 levels higher, so my salary ballooned, and that made life for my family a little bit easier at the time. But so we, my partner and I decided that we would do a tax shelter when that provision of the was implemented into the Income Tax Act for doing tax shelters. And I won't get into how that works or anything, but we decided to do that, and we, of course, we're both former Revenue Canada, now Minister of Finance employees doing the Income Tax Act or auditing under its provision. We were auditing corporations that had $50 million minimum in sales or more. And as a result, we started this tax shelter because we saw an opportunity to introduce software into the community that converted computers into cash registers and points of sales systems. So we did all of that using this tax shelter, and then Revenue Canada and I took a leave of absence to sort of run that, and then we were attacked by our own people, so to speak. Revenue Canada raided us and tore our lives apart, and for 5.5 years attempted to prosecute us. And after 5.5 years, of course, that was a way longer than the courts would accept. So the charges were all stayed as a result of that, even though we had never done anything wrong. And the fact that we had never done anything, I should say illegal, because that's different than right or wrong, but we have never done anything illegal. And I couldn't understand how this could be happening, how our lives could be torn apart like they were, my partner and I, for 5.5 years when we had done nothing illegal. So I started to search at that point. I resigned from my job and started to do, at the Minister of Finance, I started to do research, which has led me to where we are today.
Okay, so yeah, that sounds like a tough time getting through all those years of not liking working there in the first place, and then the after effect of 5 years of legal hangovers to fight through. So this led you into a different area of research about human rights, and so give us a little bit of the timeline from you leaving Revenue Canada and finding your way into knowing a heck of a lot about rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is something that Canada, the United States, and many other countries are signatory to. You learned about what those rights are, and then you learned that most of the countries that are signatory to those rights are not. They're not playing ball with that declaration. They're not playing ball with that thing that they signed. No,
they're not following it. They're not. They're violating human rights left, right, and center. But what I initially learned, and actually, there was a fellow who just died about a year ago now. I suppose he was a good friend, David Butterfield, out in BC. He had given a lecture just after we had been raided, actually. Search warrants executed and so on. My partner went to, he gave a seminar in Toronto, and she went to it, and she brought a bunch of material back and laid it on my desk. And about 3 days it laid there before I got an opportunity to look at it. So when I pulled it towards me, I looked at the front page, and there was a photocopy of a newspaper article that said, income tax is unconstitutional and nobody has to pay it. Okay? And when I read that, I knew absolutely that statement was correct.
And where did you find that quote again?
In a photocopy of a newspaper article quoting David Butterfield, who was giving the seminar.
Okay.
In Toronto. And David unfortunately passed away about a year ago, or within the last year, actually, last fall. And but anyway, that was my introduction. I knew it was true because I can recall when I was studying the income tax course, or taking the income tax course with the Certified General Accountants Association, that They sent me the legal support, if you will, or constitutional support for the government's federal government's Income Tax Act, and it was sections 91 and 92 of the Income Tax or of the Constitution Act, and 91.3 of the
91 Section 3.
Yeah, was the government's federal government's taxation powers, but 92.2 is the provincial government's taxation powers, and those powers are listed as being exclusive to the province, and direct taxation is one of those powers, and it is exclusive to them. So my question to the CGA at the time was, well, if that's an exclusive power or authority of the provincial government, how come the federal government is doing it? And they said, well, the federal government has taxation powers by any mode or system of taxation, so that gives them the right to do direct taxes as well. And I knew that was not correct at the time, but I had to accept it because I was, raising a family, doing a job, and also studying to become a Certified General Accountant Association, or a CGA, I should say. So it was very, very, very difficult for me. I couldn't find any time, so I didn't follow up on it. But I remembered from the early 70s to this point in time when that was 1998, and I never forgot what I'd read, and I never forgot the answer I got, which I knew was wrong, and I knew that what David said was correct. So I started my own independent research, and I found out absolutely, there's no question, that Federal Income Tax Act is unconstitutional. And then I asked the question of myself in my research, why then did they do it, and what was the purpose of all of this? Well, that led me into a search for that reason, and I found out that the monetary system that we are enslaved to in this country is also unconstitutional, because the federal government has a constitution to create money, not the private banks, yet the private banks are doing it, under license, of course, but that transfer of power is illegal, unconstitutional, they can't do it, and that authority was given to the banks under license, and they loan their money to us at interest, which creates a mathematical impossibility, and thus of repaying the debt, because we have to use the debt to pay the interest, which reduces the amount of cash available to pay the banks back. So it's slavery is what it is.
Whoever designed that particular system, as they look down on it on paper, they realize what it is you're saying. I can't believe that someone who is well studied in economics and in the government, say Stephen Harper, Prime Minister, or anybody else that claims to know much of how economics works, I'm sure they don't look at that and then are unable to see that is indeed the case, and that if they really were fighting for the protection and rights and prosperity of the nation, they would fix that problem.
Well, the point is they are not. That's not what they're doing. They are fighting for and ensuring the prosperity of the international banking cartel, which has a central bank in practically every country on earth now, with the exception of currently probably Syria, Iran, and North Korea.
How is it that someone is coerced into going along with that? For example, let me say to you, okay, let's say I thought this was pretty outrageous, this monetary system of slavery, and I decide, you know what, I'm going to do something about this, and I get into politics, and I run for office, and then somehow I no longer stand on that same platform, or I brush it aside. As they say, people that get into politics are usually taken over by the machine. If they can't seem to, they're taken over by the machine in such a way where even if they had benevolent ideas getting into it, they are then subjugated and coerced later on. What is the mechanism that would change my ability as a fledgling politician, if I were to be so, to bring an end to this unjust slavery system? What is going to happen to me?
Well, John F. Kennedy is a perfect example.
Okay.
Okay? He was even the president, and his fatal mistake, I believe, and I've read others who echo that perspective as well, his fatal mistake was not informing the people of the United States, which he could have done at that time, what he was up to and the purpose of it. His intention was to essentially eradicate that power and take it back from the Federal Reserve System in the United States and have the U.S. Treasury issue all of the money, or at least the vast majority of it. So he proceeded to issue $4.5 billion of United States currency, which he actually called greenbacks, just like Lincoln did. And Lincoln, by the way, was assassinated for the same reason. He issued that probably within 30 days of going to Dallas.
If you're just joining us now, I have just been compared to John F. Kennedy, which is pretty cool, in that I was putting myself forward as a politician who is trying to untie the slavery binds from the populace. I'm speaking with Wally Dove. He's a former chartered accountant and used to work at Revenue Canada in all kinds of nasty tax collection capacities and is now the founder of the Human Rights Defenders League in Canada. Okay, so that seems pretty difficult to get out of that bind. Like you're drawing, you've drawn a pretty clear example of the unfairness and the imbalance of the monetary system, about how it is absolutely, it can't perpetuate itself. It subjugates everyone into slavery, and you don't have as much power as John F. Kennedy had before he was killed. So what have you done? What is your plan to turn things around? And you do have one. Yes.
The plan ultimately is to take legal action in the courts against the front line, I guess, of the hierarchy of control or enslavement and theft, being the government and all of its agents and agencies and the CRA, and on it goes. You take a legal action for, amongst other things, and the other things may actually be more important than the human rights, but human rights violations, because every act and statute in Canada and any other nation on earth violates your human right of being born of freedom and access to your inheritance or birthright, which is the earth and all things of it. So, in other words, when a fish is taken from the sea and processed and sold, you're owed a check.
So you're saying that as a biological person born into this world, and maybe person is the wrong word, a biological human born into this world, that the boundaries, are you saying that the boundaries and the legal gameplay of the laws of the said nation that you are born and raised in should not apply to you if you choose to not have them apply to you?
Well, correct. That kind of leads us into human rights. Now, as a human being, we are Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that as all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And I just want you the people, your audience, to understand we're equal in dignity and rights. We're not equal in color, color of hair, height, intelligence, or whatever. Okay, we are all different that way, but we're all equal in dignity and rights, and that's all it says. So if you are born free and equal in dignity and rights with everyone else on this planet, every other human being on this planet, how come there are certain human beings that have gathered together that call themselves government or parliament or anything else, and then they write a bunch of rules on a piece of paper and they stamp it and they put little pretty ribbons around it? I don't care what the heck they do with it. And then they come to you and say, you have to do this, which is our will. You have to pay us X number of dollars or X a number or a percentage of your so-called income and so on, or the money that you get for your labor, you have to turn a bunch over to us. Right there, that's imposing their will on you and exercising authority over you, which none of them had individually when it started out, because they were equal in dignity and rights with you, and you with them, meaning they didn't have authority over you, you don't have authority over them. So what happened? How did all of this happen? How did they gain that authority over us? Well, the answer is alarmingly simple, but at the same time, it reveals our less than, I guess, diligence and protecting our rights. And so we participated in this. What they did is they started treating us as a fiction. You see, government is a fiction because government doesn't exist except in your mind. So there's a whole fictional world out there called government, police officers, CRA agents, CRA. They're all fictions. The only thing out there is people, human beings. That's all there is, people. There's no such thing as a police officer. You can't walk up and touch a police officer. You can walk up and touch a man or a woman or a human being wearing a uniform, a badge, and a gun. A police officer is a concept. So they have gone with the concept of person, and they recognize us as persons. And in fact, we are not persons unless we exercise or assert our right to be recognized as persons. Why? It says at Article 6 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and 16 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights that everyone, and they must be talking about human beings here, everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law.
Which would sound like a good thing.
Well, it would certainly sound like a good thing, but it is something that they assume then that we assert and want to be, because it gives us the protection of the law. It brings us under the law, because if we're recognized as persons, then that is who the law applies to, their laws, their acts and statutes, the Income Tax Act, the Highway Traffic Act, and so on. You will search high and low, and I will guarantee you right now that you will never find human being mentioned in any of those acts other than somewhere it may say a natural person is a human being. But if I waive my human right or the human right, my right to be recognized as a person, then I'm not to be recognized as a natural person either. I'm to be recognized as a human being, free and equal with all others in dignity and rights. So any act, any rule, any regulation that imposes someone else's will upon me or performance upon me, requires anything of me against my will and and without my informed consent, is a violation of human rights and is holding me in slavery or servitude, period, end of story.
And that is the basis of your suit, in that our governments, these several governments, dozens of governments around the world, have signed this agreement, which was, when was that put together, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights?
Well, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is part of the International Bill of Human Rights. Now, the Universal Declaration was brought into effect in 1948, I believe it is, and the other two documents within the International Bill of Human Rights are the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and they came into force and effect in, I think, July of 1976, but it was in 1976. And according to a letter that we have received from John Baird, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, those two international covenants are legally binding on Canada. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, however, is a very important document, he goes on to say, and we're to pay attention to it, but basically it isn't legally binding on Canada. But the other two documents are. And the other two documents are just a breakdown, if you will, of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Some of them contain in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the remainder in the other International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. All of the rights listed in the Universal Declaration are included in one of those two documents, with one exception. There is Article 1 in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is not a right, it is just simply a statement of fact. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. If we start there, just listen to what I just said, and then start asking questions like, how is it that a police officer seems to have authority, CRA seems to have authority, government seems to have authority, crown attorneys, lawyers, judges seem to have authority? And the answer is, they don't have it. Not over you as a human being. They have it over your person. And your person, the fact that you have, I was asked one time by a judge, do you have a birth certificate? And I wondered at the significance of that question for a while, and until I figured out that if I'm carrying a birth certificate, it means I'm carrying my person, my juridical personality with me. I am acting as a juridical person or person, and I am to be recognized as a person, and I'm willingly submitting myself to all of the acts and statutes, or what they call law, in Canada.
So are we tricked into believing this? We are certainly giving our consent.
Oh, absolutely.
Even in a reluctant manner, we're giving our consent somehow, because otherwise how would they be able to get away with this?
Right, and we are tricked, but we are giving our consent. When you apply for a driver's license, what do you think you're doing? You are consenting. You are agreeing. You are entering a contract with the government to subject yourself to the rules and regulations of the Highway Traffic Act.
And then you are bound.
Then you are bound. But you were tricked, too. Don't forget, you were deceived. You were first of all told you have to. You're told you are a person. We agree we're a person. Everybody calls us a person. We agree we call ourselves persons. Well, we're not. That's very, very significant. Don't underestimate the importance of that. We're not automatically persons. Why would I say that? Well, if one of our rights that is memorialized within the International Bill of Human Rights and called a human right is the right to be recognized as a person, then obviously we're not persons unless we assert or exercise that right.
And obviously you have the right to not be recognized as a person.
Well, otherwise...
Because that's the opposite.
Yeah, otherwise what is it? It's a compulsion, it's not a right. If somebody can force you to be recognized as a person, then it's not a right, it's a compulsion. I listened to a recording of a judge, an interview with a judge by an accused, who said to the judge, Your Honor, he says, do I have the right to be recognized as a person before the law? The judge says, well, of course you do. And then he says, well, I waive that right. And the judge says, well, you can't do that. You are what you are. I mean, just think about that for a second. Yeah. I mean, he says, on the one hand, you have a right to be recognized as a person, and then he says, you have to be a person. You have no choice. That's insane.
That flies in the face of what that right is.
It flies in the face of something being a right. It's my right, not theirs.
It's like you have the right to a 3-course dinner. No, that's okay. I don't want that. No, you have to eat it.
Okay. Yeah. Exactly. Wow. So if you call it a right, it is mine to exercise or waive. And that is what we say here. You know, that's what we're saying.
Now, who is we, before we get too far down that road? Who is what we are saying?
I say we because I don't want anybody to get the impression that the knowledge that I have gained over the last 16 years of intense study is mine. It isn't. We've gotten it from everybody. And I'm sure that some people have gotten some knowledge that they have now from me, or I helped them get started so that they could go and get their own knowledge. You see, if I tell you something today and you believe it because I have credibility or something to that effect, then what you have is a belief. you don't have knowledge. You must go based on what I've told you, do your own research, see for yourself that what I'm saying is true, and then you will have knowledge.
Right. Okay, so...
That's when knowledge will set you free.
Right. Okay, so now we're at a place where you were instrumental in forming the Human Rights Defenders League in Canada. And just to clarify and to put this in a capsule, this is to show us all, yourself and everyone else that comes across it, that these human rights that are ours and are inherent are being trampled upon by the very fictions, as you say, the police system, which are corporate companies.
Yeah, could I just...
the courts and the different legal ramifications of being a citizen of a country. And that is what you were taking issue with the action?
Yeah, let me just put it in perspective, though. The International Bill of Human Rights do not give us anything. The government or the United Nations or anybody else cannot give me a right. We call them our human rights. It's kind of technically incorrect to do that, but I do it all the time.
But they're recognizing them or not?
Well, yeah, the point is we are born free and equal in dignity and rights, so we have all rights. It's unfettered. We have the right to do anything we want on this planet, and including bringing harm to another, I guess. We have a right to do that, but that is the only crime we can commit, is to harm another or damage their possessions. That's it. Other than that, no human being is guilty of any crime or wrongdoing. So we have the right to do anything, and what the International Bill of Human Rights is a document drawn up by government or signed by government agents, drawn up by the UN. It doesn't really matter, wherein they bind themselves to the recognition of those rights, and they call them human rights, and they only form a portion or include a portion of our natural intrinsic rights. And that's very important to view it that way, because otherwise we're standing under the law. We're using their law to say that law gives us these rights, and it does not. That's the wrong way to look at it.
It's a recognition of it or not recognizing it.
This law binds you, sir, not me. It's got nothing to do with me.
And what do you say, and I guess you might have said everything you just said, but what would you say to a person who says, well, then from where do those rights come in the first place that the government does or doesn't recognize?
Well, whether or not we believe in a creator, then I would say my rights came from my creator, the one who created me.
Well, let's say Richard Dawkins is also afforded those same rights because he's alive, but he doesn't believe in a creator, or anybody that's an atheist or an avowed science-minded person that doesn't have any time for religion or spirituality or God.
That's fair.
Where do they get their rights from?
Same place. They were born with them.
Okay, so the governments have decided to cobble together a reflection of those inherent rights in 47, 48 with these various covenants and declarations. That's all they are, is just a recognition thereof.
That's correct. That's correct. Our intrinsic natural rights come because we come from nature. We come into this world naturally, and nature. We're the highest form of being, if we want to put it that way, in terms of, I guess, intelligence and so on. And we're all equal. So we have, therefore, unlimited rights to do anything that we wish. And if we want to destroy our environment and our nature, I suppose we can do that, but that's kind of silly. But it's being done today, left, right, and center, by these inanimate things called corporations, those things that exist only in our minds. People are hiding behind them and doing all manner of horrors to other human beings and to our environment.
All right. I'm speaking with Wally Dove. He is one of the founders of the Human Rights Defenders League in Canada. Wally, I want to put this quickly back over to the monetary situation. this artificial system that we are never going to get out of if it's left the way it is. That is obviously a trampling of our rights because we're in servitude at that point.
Well, yes. Before I get there, I would just like to say one thing. What is going on in this world, but let's stick with this country that I live in right now. What's going on is a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy amongst the courts, the judiciary, the government, the police, the CRA. Doesn't really matter. They're all in this conspiratorial program of enslavement and theft. They don't know it. I'll guarantee a lot of them, the majority, do not know what they're part of. But they are part of it. If a bank takes you to court and trying to foreclose, they know they are going to win. They know the judge is going to agree with them. It does not matter. I'm talking from my personal experience now. There is a breaking of the rules and the law, left, right, and center by all of them. We have to face that fact and accept it for now. And don't get angry, don't get upset. Just be determined to understand what's going on, and we'll fix it. And we'll fix it with our legal action, which we'll talk about in a bit. But now, the monetary system, could I just give you a quick course in how the monetary system works and why it is creates a mathematical impossibility for us and is really enslaving.
Okay, let's do that, and let's merge that into what it is that you've done and where people can find out more about this.
Well, I'd like to go right to the end. They can find out a lot more by visiting www.humanrightsdefenders.ca and read our book and look at the videos that are there, and that's a good place to start their studies.
Okay.
Now, the monetary system is this. All of our money in Canada is created and loaned to us as individual human beings, to corporations, or to government. And if one of those three does not borrow from the banks, there is no money. So all of our money is debt. That's why you may have heard the term debt currency. It is debt currency because it is borrowed. That's how it becomes debt. So if you keep that concept in mind and accept it for now, because like I said, I challenge everyone to go do your own research. Don't take your belief from me. Get your knowledge based on what I'm telling you or explaining to you, and then you'll know for yourself. But so take a little bowl as an exercise to get the concept. Take a bowl and put 10 coins in there. It doesn't matter the denomination necessarily. Just put 10 coins in there and say, okay, this is where the imagination takes over. This represents all of the money in Canada, all of it, the trillions of dollars maybe that are in circulation. I don't really know. I don't care. That represents all of it, though. And now remember, it's all borrowed, which means it's debt, which means it has to be paid back. If the lender asks the borrower to pay it back, or when the terms of the contract stipulate, it has to be paid back. That's the deal. And that's what our money is. So now, let's assume that the first interest period comes along, and we have to pay the banks interest on our debt, on our borrowed money. So let's assume that rate is 10%. So you take one of those coins out of the bowl and you give it to the banks, and it's gone. Now, we borrowed 10 coins, and we've only got 9 left. We cannot now, immediately after the first interest payment, pay back the debt, and we never will, and that will continue until all of the money or cash is gone in interest and we have none left.
And that's the path we're on.
And that's what the system is. That's the design flaw in the system, if you will. And it's not a flaw. It is what they've done to enslave us.
And that's what I can't change as a fledgling politician without taking a bullet to the head.
Well, yeah, or here's your protection: an educated public. If the people know what's going on, you won't take a bullet to the head by doing the right thing.
Well, who said it? Rockefeller or one of those old barons said, "I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers."
Sure. And Henry Ford, I think it was, said, if the people figure this system out and figure out what we are doing to them, there will be a revolution before morning. Now, revolution is not a good word, but the point is, if we can take this whole system to court and have a really, really good lawyer, which we have, very experienced lawyer, which we have, and knows the system and can maneuver through the court system, then this thing can be stopped. And that is why we want, or I personally am appealing to everyone to get to go to our site and register, name, email address. That's all we need. And when we are ready to file the action, and the lawyer wants affidavits or affirmations from everybody, we'll let everyone know, and they can do their affidavit and give it to the lawyer, and that way they become a plaintiff. Now, if we go to court with 10 plaintiffs, we're in no better position, or we're no safer than John F. Kennedy was, or the lawyer is no safer. But if we go with several million plaintiffs, we now are safer because they know the public gets educated, and they're going to have to start listening.
All right. So once again, that website is humanrightsdefendersleague.ca.
Yes.
And there's a lot of great information there. And on one of the top banners, it says Our Legal Action. And you can click on there and join up and be a part of not getting screwed over anymore.
And my purpose now, and to sum up what my purpose is to try to educate as many people as I can and to recruit as many to the legal action.
Do you have a Twitter handle?
It's there, yes, and I'm not savvy on those things. But, yeah, Facebook's, Twitter, and the whole thing is
all in there.
On the website. You can go through the website and get there.
Okay. Well,
so I don't honestly know much about it, and I've been a victim or whatever, I guess, dependent upon webmasters to do all of this work, and they've done a great job so far, so...
Okay, now let's. This has been great. I just want to make sure if there's anything important that you want to add, that you have time to do that. But I just want to ask you. Let's say this lawsuit goes through. There are a lot of people behind it. Then you win. What does that mean? What will the changes be based on a victory of this particular legal action? Well,
we will be returning to freedom and access to our birthright, equality with one another. That's what it ultimately will mean. How that happens, I'm not, I can't say.
Right,
that.
The machinations are, but I'm not exactly clear what you mean by that, like what that victory looks like.
Well, you can envision freedom, I suppose, where nobody can tell you what to do, but for example, right now you're dependent upon money for everything, and if you don't have money, you can't get food. Well, the way it is described in the Bible, as an example, not that has to be the way it is done, but when a fish is caught off the coast out in Newfoundland, it is put on a truck. Processed possibly, but put on a truck and taken to the IGA or the Foodland in, say, Toronto. And you go and you pick it up and you take it home and you eat it. Now, none of that requires money, okay? But that also is freedom. We have to produce in order for things to exist for us to use. So the Bible even suggests that you take your produce, your tithes and offerings, and you put them in the storehouses so there will be meat for all. So if you're getting the picture, everything that we do that we don't need personally, or everything we produce, we take to the storehouses wherever it is. Maybe it's an automobile storehouse, or a computer storehouse, or a grocery storehouse, or any number of other things that we need. And we take them and we put them there so that people can go pick them up. You don't need money for all of this. There are two purposes of money. One is enslavement, as I've already explained, and the other is theft. Because when you use their money to buy things with, and so on, and you can't pay the debt, you're going to go bankrupt. They get everything.
All right.
So that's part of it. That's not the only way they get everything, by the way. It's deeper than that, but let's stop right there.
Okay. So if there's anything else you want to say before we sign off, and I would like to know when will this legal action move forward, and is it depending on how many people register and sign up on the website?
Well, actually, it doesn't depend on the number of people that sign up. It's going ahead regardless. I believe right now that we don't need any more contributions, because I believe, I'm not sure about this, but I think the lawyer is either doing it, free of charge, or he is already been paid.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to it. Once again, folks, that's humanrightsdefendersleague.ca. Click the Our Legal Action button and spend a lot of time on the rest of the website as well. Wally, thank you very much for coming on. I wish you and everyone involved the best with the legal action. And perhaps once it gets up and through, we'll have you back on the show.
Well, I'd be happy to come back. But the lawyer has assured us that it will be filed before November anyway, or by November. But the only delay we're experiencing right now is time scheduling in the court system, because he has to discharge certain commitments he's made to his former clients. He's getting out of the legal business because he'll be pushed out like I was pushed out of the CGA.
Once he shepherds this suit through, they won't want him in the bar anymore. Is that what
No, sir. I can assure you of that.
All right. Okay, well, I will look forward to getting an update with you from it, however that stands. Thanks for coming on, Wally. Thanks for listening to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Please offer comments or complaints by emailing conspiracyqueries@gmail.com or on Twitter @con_queries or at our website, conspiracyqueries.com. Thanks for listening.